Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our 2020 annual meeting of Berkshires Inc. and this fireside chat titled Put Your Money Where Your Life Is, which is with our lovely board member, John Lewis, and very well-respected local economy consultant, Michael Shuman. So it's going to be a great conversation tonight. My name is Rachel Moriarty. I help to coordinate the Berkshires programs. So thanks for joining us. And if you're joining us for the first time, Berkshires is a democratically structured, place-based nonprofit whose mission is to promote regional economic self-reliance in the region. Our most well-known initiative is our local currency, which serves as a tool to support our locally owned business community. And so as a membership organization, our annual meeting is an opportunity for our members to engage in this democratic process of electing our board members and approving our budget for the upcoming year. But it's also an opportunity for us to share some new ideas with you. And so we are so pleased to be able to have this fireside chat tonight. I would like to thank all of our sponsors for this evening. They include One Berkshire, Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation, Berkshire Community Land Trust, Berkshire County Branch of the NAACP, Berkshire Grown, E for All, Multicultural Bridge, Reset Enterprises, Willow Investments for Loving Change, Salisbury Bank and Trust Company, Schumacher Center for New Economics, and the Southern Berkshire Chamber of Commerce. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and I will turn it over to Gillette.
Great, thank you, Rachel. And thanks to everyone who's joined us. I'm very excited to kind of bring this event to everyone who's joining us tonight. And also just to let everybody know, we will be recording this session, so it will be posted on our website. And if there's anyone that you think would be interested in viewing it, please share that with them. We'll also be sending out kind of a blog summary in the next week or two of the event as well, just to kind of close that out. So there'll be a great opportunity for people to still access this and the wonderful dialogue between John and Michael. So I want to share a little bit of the context of bringing you this particular talk tonight. One of the things that the board over the past year, like many boards, like many organizations in this COVID time, as well as in the time of really responding to Black Lives Matter, we wanted to offer this discussion because it's really crystallized our thinking and really, kind of lit a fire of how is it that we as an organization, how can Berkshires more fully step into its mission, which is very squarely about creating resilient and self-sustaining local economies. And for us, it's of course for our Berkshire community. And there's going to be rebuilding that's going to have to be done from an economic perspective from COVID-19. And we want to be sure that we're having conversations with our community, within our board, and even outside of our county about what it means to rebuild in a fully inclusive way that enables all members to participate in the economy and in creating a prosperous and self-sustaining and resilient local economy in the Berkshires. And so, this fits squarely in our mission. So, what we're finding is in response to COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter, our feeling that the work that Berkshires has been doing, not only as the currency, but its larger mission of providing, to encourage and administer sort of educational and practical programs for the furtherance of regional economic self-reliance is really quite critical. So that's the kind of the context within which we bring this particular event tonight as part of our annual meeting. And today being December 1st, as well as serendipitously Giving Tuesday, we're also launching our annual campaign for fundraising for our work. So while we're bringing this event to you free this evening, we would hope that you would feel so compelled to to put Berkshires in your annual giving plan before the end of the year. And I believe Rachel will put up a link at some point with the link to take you to our website, but you can easily go to our website. And we would very much ask that you support the work that we're doing and encourage others, maybe post on your Facebook, your LinkedIn, et cetera. We would be most appreciative for any support that our locality, our community, and further afield can provide for this very necessary work. So without further ado, let me bring to you Michael and John, our talk this evening. And this talk, we've actually pulled it from Michael's most recent book, Put Your Money Where Your Life Is: How to Invest Locally Using Solo 401ks and Self-Directed IRAs. This book just came out in 2020. And so, feel free. I think the talk, you'll learn quite a lot, and I think it'll pique your interest to want to get his book and dive further into that. He is an economist, an attorney, an author, and an entrepreneur. He has, kind of a leading visionary on community economics. And so we are just honored and thrilled to have him join us tonight for this. And we are equally honored to be bringing our own John Lewis as well to this. John has an illustrious background. He's a senior level executive. He's worked both with startups and with established companies. He's founded his own companies and organizations. So, as an entrepreneur and a kind of a leading visionary as well for developing B corporations and looking very seriously and conscientiously at what it means to build a business, what it means to build a business, an economy locally. So we're just thrilled to have him here. And he's the CEO of Reset Enterprises, and he's also the chairman of the Berkshire Black Economic Council. So he's going to be able to bring to you, very much our Berkshire perspective. I will just like to say that when we were preparing for this, both John and Michael, we discovered that they are both Midwestern boys. Both Michael and John bring not only John brings not only the local perspective, but he also brings in a perspective from outside of our community that helps to enrich it, and certainly Michael as well. So quickly, the format is going to be Michael. He's going to take about 10 minutes to present some of his work. We'll then go to John, who will also then speak to some of his work for about 10 minutes. And then we're kind of engaging in this fireside chat or a dialogue between the two of them for about 10 to 15 minutes. But we still will have plenty and ample time afterwards for questions and answers from them. In the meantime, while they're talking, please feel free to use the chat function, put in your questions. If you have a comment or an answer or a resource, certainly feel free to put that into the chat. We highly encourage that. I'll be monitoring some of those questions, and I'll be able to bring some of those into the beginning of the Q&A. But once we get to the formal Q&A, we will ask that you could unmute yourself and ask your question directly, because this is not a webinar. This is meant to be more like a virtual town meeting. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Michael and ask that he get us started. Thanks, Michael.
Great. Thank you so much, Gillette. Great pleasure to be with my friends at Berkshires, and great to be in dialogue with John, or continuing the dialogue that we had in a practice session about 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to share my screen here, and just give me a second. I decided that what I wanted to do is really give you 10 fun facts about local investment in 10 minutes as a way of orienting you around the work that's going on. So the first fun fact, really, actually this is more of the context. I, like most of you, am a great fan of Jane Jacobs, and Jane Jacobs really laid out a very elaborate and nuanced vision of a localized world, and she spoke about the importance of local and regional currencies. But it wasn't just for purposes of buying. It was to use local and regional currencies for investment, for the acquisition of new capital and new industry. And so it's in that spirit that I really want to talk about what's happened with local investment. And the first thing to say is that there has been under our midst a legal revolution. It used to be exceedingly expensive and difficult for a small business to take even 1 penny of investment from a grassroots investor. And thanks to legal changes known as the Jobs Act, investment crowdfunding was legalized in 2016. And basically, any business can go to one of 50 federally licensed portals and raise up to $1.1 million. Any investor can invest in a given year $2,200 without respect to your income, and over $100,000 of income, and you can invest more. So a few fun facts about the record of crowdfunding. So in the 4 years, it's really less than 4 years, 700,000 Americans have invested about $350 million. They've invested it in several thousand companies. The average raise by a company has been over $300,000. The average investment has been over $500. And the most successful entrepreneurs have been women and people of color. That is precisely those people that the existing marketplace has overlooked. The second fun fact is that investment crowdfunding has diversified the offerings. And one of the trends that I've noticed is that instead of just being able to find businesses on the federal sites, you can now find local real estate projects. And a good example of this is Small Change. And these are mission-oriented real estate projects all over the country. But again, these federal sites try to facilitate relationships and transactions between local investors and local businesses. The third fun fact is that despite all of the challenges of COVID, and there are many, people's savings overall in the country have actually gone up in many communities. And one of the things that they are doing with these savings is investing in local businesses. And there has been, since the advent of COVID in February, March, every single month has broken a new record in the level of crowdfunding going on right now. So it is a trend that I think is here to stay. The fourth fun fact is that the Securities and Exchange Commission changed the rules around crowdfunding in several significant ways in the first week of November. So while all of you were paying attention to the election, and I guess I'll admit I was too, it was really what the SEC that was doing that was extraordinary. So now any business, any project can raise not $1 million in a year, but $5 million. So it just breaks wide open this universe of possibilities. Another thing that the SEC did is they now allow you to create a website where you bring grassroots investors and businesses into the site, and they can communicate about investing before there's any deal on the table. Now you'd think, hey, that's free speech. Wasn't that always legal? And the truth is, no, that was regarded by the SEC as general solicitation and banned unless you jump through a bunch of administrative and legal hurdles. Well, that is now history. Fun fact number 5. In addition to the ability of crowdfunding, whoops, got to go back there. We are now seeing more and more investment funds. And I'm just going to pause for a second and ask Rachel a question. I've got a a black box that came up on my screen. Is it on yours as well?
Nope.
Good. Okay. So I will just pretend it's not there then. Some ghost that has come here. So I think many of us, while we love the idea of local investing, what gets in the way is that it's difficult to go company by company through them, review them. Then you have to pick them and you have to manage things. And we really prefer to put our money in funds with a diversified portfolio where someone is doing a lot of that work for us. And the good news is that there has been this dramatic spread of community-based investment funds. So in Western Massachusetts, for example, there is the Pioneer Valley Grows Fund around local food businesses. And in the other side of Massachusetts, there's the Boston Impact Fund and the Ujima Fund, which are supporting Black-led entrepreneurs. So if you're interested in this topic, I did a handbook with several others. Maybe Rachel can put the link in. It's available on the NC3, National Coalition for Community Capital website, and it'll tell you all of these wonderful case studies of local investment funds. So the next thing that I think is happening that's important is that we are rethinking local investment, that local investment is not just about investing in outside businesses or outside projects, but we're thinking about it in terms of our own finances. And, you know, honestly, getting our own financial house in order is critical to preventing leaks in our community. One of the biggest leaks in our community is the interest that we pay on non-local credit cards. So getting ourselves out of credit card debt, getting our kids out of credit card debt or student loan debt, these are all important kinds of local investment. Moving people from renters into owners, helping people pay down their mortgages faster, helping people install solar equipment or energy efficiency, helping people in the community get an education, get a higher degree, and raise their income levels. These are all viable types of local investment that we should be thinking about. The next one that I want to talk about, if I can get this thing to move, there we go, is that some types of local investment are not securities. In other words, they don't qualify as things that the Securities and Exchange Commission are going to be regulating. So a good example of this is pre-purchasing. When you're pre-purchasing a large amount of something from a business that's been around for a while, in most circumstances, this is not a security. So when COVID first hit, my partner and I decided we were going to adopt and try to save one business we loved near us, and that is Busboys and Poets. Busboys and Poets is restaurant, bar, gathering place, bookstore, wonderful place. This is the proprietor, Andy Shalal. We reckon that we spend at Busboys and Poets in a non-pandemic year about $1,000. So we wrote Andy a $1,000 check, and we said to him, use this money for cash flow, use this money to support an extra employee, and just, give us $1,000 of gift cards and we'll use it gradually sometime in the future. He was so pleased, he gave us $1,200 of gift cards. So we got a 20% rate of return on our investment. Now, honestly, we can't save any one business, we personally, but we as a community can do this, and we can put up a website that invites all kinds of businesses to get pre-purchasing from thousands of residents. And we don't need permission from the SEC to do this. So we should view this as an important entry point into local investment. Fun fact number 8, and this is the main point that I talk about in my new book, is that we now know about tools, namely the solo 401k and the self-directed IRA, that enable people with tax-deferred pension funds to put that money into local businesses. Most of us have these funds locked up in IRAs or 401ks that can only invest in variations of things on Wall Street. But there are easy ways to break down those walls and put that money to good use locally. Number 9, there is an emerging infrastructure on local investment that we can all take advantage of. Last night I spoke to a group of what are called Lions in Washington State, local investment opportunity networks. And for example, the Lion in Port Townsend, Washington, was founded in 2006. Port Townsend is a town of 10,000 people, and just through a monthly gathering that introduced local investors and local businesses, they facilitated more than $1 million of local investment per year since 2006. So imagine what your community with a larger population could do. And there's a bunch of emerging organizations like the Next Egg or National Coalition for Community Capital. And I'm soon going to start distributing a newsletter, which is going to consolidate all of the information out there in blogs and help you identify people in your community who really want to organize local investment networks. The last thing that I'll just say is that for those of you who are eager to dive into the local investment world, I am launching a course in the first week of January, Local Investment 101. Has 15 different video modules for businesses, for organizers, or just people who are interested in local investment. So if anyone wants to go deeper in all of this, if you're intrigued by all of this, please sign up for my newsletter and I will let you know more about this. This is my calling card, but significantly I blog at michaelhschuman.com. So I am going to stop there and eager to hear what my friend John has to say.
All right, that was great, Michael. I wish I had a presentation like yours. Next time I'll make sure I do that. When Berkshire has asked me about, speaking and being a part of this fireside chat, I feel like a lot of times, oftentimes we get into the technical speak, of what are we doing, and but how do we engage from, the soul, or what is it that we're really talking about? And I think Michael really touched on this in terms about there's a really great opportunity for us to kind of, because of COVID, to rethink pretty much everything. Even though, I always use the analogy, it's like the Etch-a-Sketch, and I love using that because everybody really understands that, people who are not, who are older, like ourselves, and then you draw these lines in the Etch-a-Sketch, but if you don't like what you see, you can always turn it over, shake it, and then start over again. And I think that COVID provides, that opportunity for local communities and local economies for us to really rethink it, because of what it showed us, where those systems can actually break down, and us opening ourselves up. So I wanted to share with you, because from our organization at Reset, we started with what was our why, and Simon Sinek talks about this all the time, like understanding your why and what you believe. But one of the things he also talked about was having a manifesto within your organization. And I wanted to share that manifesto with you, to really kind of spark us to really start thinking from our own, let's say, rethinking everything also challenges our fears. It forces us to be courageous. It forces us to take risks and to look at things a lot larger. So let me share with you this manifesto that I think is so powerful. It says, "It is easy to become prisoners of our beliefs. Shackled by thoughts of scarcity, we're told there isn't enough to go around. and that the pie only has so many slices. But that was the old industrial age. We got trapped by our insecurity and fear, secretly thinking that to prosper meant stepping over each other on the way up. We spent too long going through routines, not looking for real solutions. We let our passions pass us by, secretly hoping that something will crash into our lives and change our fate. Never looking inside to scratch that subtle itch. That things just aren't good enough as they might be. Never acknowledging the question, is this it? We believe that those who will thrive in the new hyperconnected world will be those who unleash their creativity, follow their passions, free themselves from the mundane world of long outdated systems and beliefs. And I think that really kind of encapsulate what Reset is all about. Like Reset, we build and support impact-driven businesses and communities and ecosystems that help people transform their lives, their organizations, and their communities. We do that by amplifying people's power to transform themselves in their communities in the world. So how do we actually change our thinking? How do we go about rethinking everything? One of the biggest things that we did at Reset was begin to be able to get out and ask the community. Some of you have already heard of the idea jams, because we believe, as Maya Angelou said, abundance, creativity is the most abundant resource that we have. So what we created was a quick design thinking process, which is called our idea jam, where we're able to marshal reports very quickly and communicate back to our communities the different ideas and things they see around different problems. And then we create investment opportunities or strategies or reports around that. A good place to go check us out in terms of doing that work, and I'll ask Rachel to put this in, is Team Reset, TEAMR3SET.com. If you could put that in the chat, it's TEAMR3SET.com. So our belief is, we believe personal growth, creativity, and radical collaboration are the keys to solving what we believe are the biggest challenges. But we also believe that, and I love this whole thing what Mike was talking about, investment. So as Reset, we've invested a lot in this community, not only in terms of our time, but our talent and also our resources locally. And we feel like that if in fact everybody did this maybe under a contributionism strategy, where we're investing 15% of our time, talent, and resources to make this community a better place, what would that look like? And we want to be able to empower those individuals to be able to do that. So when you go to our website, we have different academies and different groups and classes and courses that you can be involved in. And I want to talk about one of the actual, well, actually a few of them, but maybe two or three, moving us forward, just trying to keep in time. One of the things that we really focused in on was narrative development. Like, what kind of story are we telling ourselves as it relates to how we're building a local economy? And what is that vision? And how are we communicating that vision? And how are we communicating the powerful stories that are actually there in terms of the innovation and also the stalwarts within our local economies of communities and businesses that are supporting local communities? And one of the things that we did in the beginning is invest in a podcast and storytelling studio called Speakeasy Studios. And with that, we launched literally the first regional podcast called That Berkshire Podcast. And a part of the radical collaboration is that we collaborated with One Berkshire to launch that first podcast in terms of featuring stories of those local businesses who are successful here. And this is all based on the research of, and I don't know if you guys, the creative economy research that came out of One Berkshire that was really talking about the brain drain that's happening between young people who are leaving the Berkshires. So what we wanted to do was begin to be able to really change the narrative, get our old parochial thinking, and really tell more positive stories about people moving here and the collaboration that is happening here. And if you want to check out that podcast series, which was launched during COVID, so people can have it when Berkshire did, it's called That Berkshire Podcast. It's on Spotify. And there we interview AOK. And I don't know if you guys have been north, if you haven't had AOK's barbecue, I'm just saying, it's to die for. What was cool about their story is that they moved here from Las Vegas. He was a chef. And the story was so magnificent. And this is what I think that really makes local communities like the Berkshires really work. Because this is how I think Michael and them are talking about it, how we're really bringing it home. They came here, the particular job or gig that they came for fell through. They had to figure out some place to work. I guess they talked to some friends, walked into Bright Ideas, and they said they must have been looking brand spanking new because everybody's like, what's going on? And eventually they ended up becoming bartenders there while trying to figure out a new business plan. Well, that collaboration led to them meeting the owner of Mass Mocha, giving them an opportunity to open up this barbecue place, which they only open 4 days a week. It's all takeout. But they also talked about how the community came together to actually really support this business. So when we're talking about like rethinking everything, we're looking at and empowering local communities. It's those kinds of stories, because we can talk about it in the abstract, but how does it happen in its reality? How do we invest in it? And that individual invested in them to open up that business. And this is why I love talking with Michael, because it's that conversation. It is those strategies and tools that were actually applied, to make ALK a successful business, who, by the way, did very good during COVID, because, you had the ability to be able to just, grab food and then leave. I don't know how am I doing in terms of time to that. Cool. The other piece is moving towards innovation. And this is another collaboration that Reset did with Eforol. And I love Peter was here, and I know he probably had to jet out. But during COVID-19, Peter asked at the leadership board meeting that I sit on, he was saying, well, what is it that we're learning here? What is it that we need to do? And I said, well, Peter, I think a lot of businesses got caught off base not being online and not having a web store or any of those things. So what could we, I think that we need to do some kind of online accelerator. Deborah chimed in and said, yes, I agree. And Deanna Roofer, shout out to Deanna from the city, was like, yes, I agree. We definitely need to do this. We think this is helpful. And it was through that collaboration that we were able to create the first online accelerator in Berkshire County, having over 20 businesses there, and many of the reviews that we got saved those businesses. So if you think about these kinds of collaborations, when we're talking about local economics in action, we're looking at those kinds of collaborations to where we can say, well, hey, at the board level, there's talking about investment in local communities. There's new ideas that are being embraced. And the city invested probably 90% of the funds. And then you had Greylock and Berkshire County Community Foundation to round out the rest. So we're looking at those kinds of scenarios. And lastly, our last biggest investment, and some of you guys already known about it, is that Reset did a big investment in really working with the Black community to really create this Black Economic Council that we became chairman of. But we needed to marshal a report, and use our Idea Jam tool and strategies to figure out how we could hear from them and create a report that would allow people to understand what the resources are and how we can include and create more of an inclusive economy here in the Berkshires. And I can tell you that that was been very successful. So kind of rounding this thing out for me, because I don't want to move, I want to get into more having conversations with Michael, because I read his book and I went through his blog and I'm super excited to get the conversation going, is check out our website, because there's a lot of tools and groups that you can join. But we think that the biggest one that we're doing right now is that we've created after this an inclusive economy think tank. And we want to take this report and really work with other community stakeholders to help us kind of think through this. And I tell you, the response has been great. Susan has jumped on this already, in terms of where she sees Schumacher can actually fill in. We just raised $100,000 for Black and Brown businesses through Adam Hines and Berkshire Regional Planning. So it's these kind of collaborations that we're really looking at to say, okay, and what kind of investments we need to make. And with DEC, we kind of marshal what we call a kind of a what I believe is a very doable reparations plan moving forward. How do we, account for the mistakes in the past and invest for the future, and understanding that a thriving Black community is a thriving Berkshire community as a whole. So I'm going to wrap it up there and say thank you. But definitely check out some of the other stuff that we have on our website. Again, it's Team Reset, TEAMR3SET.com. And you can just peruse around the website. You can join groups, you can check out our classes, you can sign in. And we would love to have you. We would love to have you help continue to work. We like great thinkers, we like creators, and we like innovators. And if you want to join a community of individuals that are all about that, then that's what Team Reset is about. And thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, John. Thank you, Michael. So we've heard both from both of our speakers in terms of some kind of, I'd say macro or meso level types of things down to the micro from kind of Michael's perspective, some, kind of vehicles or investment tools. And we've also heard from John about, I love this notion of 15% of your time, talent, and resources, if everyone were to make that investment. So I'd like to I'll start the Q&A, but, for everybody on the event, please don't be shy. If you have a question, please just chat with me, and I'll call on you to be able to unmute yourself and then to ask your question directly. But one question is, what do you two feel are the commonalities and values that can play in both of your work areas? The notion of aggregating capital and taking an integrated approach, how does local economy building serve racial and economic justice? So maybe to just kind of get your joint kind of dialogue going amongst yourselves, I'd just like to turn it over to you for the two of you to kind of share a little bit where you think, when it comes to the Berkshires specifically, what are some really tangible things that you see for our community? John, I know you've spoken a bit about that through, say, the Team Reset agenda, but I'd love to hear about what do you think that intersection is between the two areas of work for both of you? And then I'll just sort of let you guys riff a little bit. I mean, we had some questions that, when we prepared, we had some really good dialogue. So I'd love for Michael and John for you to ask each other questions to inform each other's work with your own experience, sort of to turn inside out for all of us, a conversation between the two of you, in fact.
Cool. I'm going to start with Michael's stuff because I think, what I think the common, well, I mean, okay, you want to see your book, man? I've been highlighting, just going crazy. Because I was like, yes, you were really speaking to me here. But one of the things is that Gillette, that I think is where I think it's a common is really, what is a good definition of local? Michael, remember you wrote about that, and you gave us kind of three different ways of looking at what is a good definition of local. You said one was proximity, ownership, and control. Now, for me, those are the same things. If anybody attended the presentation we had from the report from the Black Economic Council, these were the same three things we were talking about. So I just want to open this up to you because, I thought this was so clear, but also very profound in a way that I think that really people talk about local all the time, but we should really, really hunker down on really defining what that means.
Yeah, and so it's for me, if I go back 25, 30 years when I first sort of got drawn into the whole discourse about local economies, I think one of the sort of aha realizations, and I can't remember who I read it from, or maybe I read it in multiple places, was just saying that, economic distress is not about not having capital or wealth. I mean, yes, those things matter, but economic distress comes from leakage. It comes from money coming into your economy and leaving instantly. And the ability to hold on to the money, or whatever your resource form of transfer in currency is, but the ability to hold on to it is your own economy and your own control of the economy. And I feel like what has been so systematically taken away from African Americans from slavery, and so systematically taken away from Native Americans as they were, basically cheated out of their land in treaty after treaty. These are parts of our history that we have to come to terms with. And I feel like making our communities work for everyone is part of that. Making communities of color, maybe that are less integrated, I think that is critical. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you, John, because I've been thinking about this a lot for the last couple of weeks, is what are the small acts of reparations we can take at a community level?
That's a good one. One of the things is how we've been looking at it is not just this big boatload of cash. And then we're like, oh, this is reparations, because I think a lot of people interpret it that way. And I'm like, no, that's not.
Like, let's make a deal. Door number 2 is reparations.
I think small acts, and one of the things that we can do is, and we're working on this in one of our platforms, which we call a community power platform, but that is also taking your money and investing it into Black businesses. That is like something that is super real. Like, how many Black businesses are you actually supporting? And I found that a lot of people during COVID-19 wanted to know where they were, and they were like, okay, where do we go? So we're solving that problem, as Reset, and along with some other folks, with the Black Economic Council and some of the other folks that are which is going to be called like the Berkshires platform, which is our community empowerment platform, where number one, we need to know where all the resources are. They need to be curated in one location. 2, a directory. And then 3, we need to tell more powerful stories about the Black community here. We have to change the narrative. I can't tell you how much when I walk into a meeting, I'm pretty much sick of the fact that people say underserved, underprivileged, then minority, and all 3 of it together in the same word. And I'm like, no, we're not all that. Not all of us. So then therefore, how do we begin to tell stories? So that's number 1, doing business with them. The other is a concrete action is aggressive supplier diversity programming, meaning that we need governments and businesses to do long-term contracts with local businesses. I mean, that is a fundamental way to move that forward. And and I'm from Kansas City, so, and you're from St. Louis, so that both of those cities, because Missouri was the last place to free the slaves, so Black folks had to really get it together.
Yeah. Arguably, it's still not happening.
Right. But on the more aggressive supply diversity end, meaning that, the lifeblood of any local business, and these larger local businesses should be doing business with local Black companies. And I use the analogy of Elegant Stitches. They actually make masks now, for employees. Well, General Dynamics. I'm like, well, you have 1,000 employees who need masks. You could have a logo on your mask for your people. So why are you not doing a long-term contract with them? Or, Smoky Divas, who has a sauce, and now that sauce is in the store locally, Big Y, and Guido's helped them. Really, that story is amazing. Help them do that, but also they could also be a vendor, supplying food to local universities or to General Dynamics or to, BHS Hospital, because those are the things that help, local businesses. And so I see those kinds of activities as a form of reparations. The other thing that we were talking with is that we're going to be doing a presentation with the nonprofits, because we want to start working with the nonprofits to say, okay, here are our goals. Here's what's happening. So now we can say, how can you, now that you have these resources, now that you know what it is we need, how can we collectively curate those resources in very targeted areas to be able to do that? So those are the top 3 things, Michael, I think that we can first start doing. And then the last one is we need more Black folks at the decision-making tables. Like leadership circles, like board positions, executive positions. Those are incredibly important, because then that means that our views should be represented.
Right.
And then therefore you're not making decisions in a bubble that's not inclusive.
And, one of the things I would add to that is I think those of us who have sung the praises of small businesses for our lives, we tend to cut slack to businesses and say, well, okay, this is your ship. You don't have to have any outside owners in it. But I think it would be nice to invite businesses to diversify their ownership with more community investors, in part as a way of creating a more inclusive decision-making apparatus in the business. I mean, so often we talk about diversity as just the diversity of the workforce, and that's important. But if it's, a white owner and a white board and a diverse workforce, you still got a problem. And I feel like changing the ownership and localizing the ownership at the same time is part of the solution. There's one other thing I wanted to point out, and that is, to tie this back to what I mentioned about the recent SEC rule change. Your website, so John has a bunch of websites that he is developing content for right now. And I have a website I have a much crummier website in Maryland called the Maryland Neighborhood Exchange. And one of the things that I discovered is on that website, and in the Maryland Neighborhood Exchange, I'm trying to encourage people to invest in Black businesses in Baltimore. And I can list those businesses that have offerings on the nationally licensed crowdfunding websites. But if I listed businesses and I said, here are 10 businesses I think are really great, and let's have some conversation with those businesses so that they do crowdfunding, that was illegal until 2 weeks ago.
Gotcha.
Right? So now you can do that. And I think one of the great things that you can do on your websites and bring in the community is, let's create an honor roll of 10 of the most promising Black-led businesses in the Berkshires, and let's really figure out how we're going to build the fan base to get them duly funded.
Yeah, I really like that idea, and I think that's another, like you said, form of reparations or whatever, in terms of how to, because you're saying we have a solution now to bring extra capital into businesses that maybe are usually not traditionally banked, right? In very creative ways that did not exist 2 weeks ago. I love that strategy of 10 businesses or 10 or 20 businesses, because I've ran into regular business owners who've been relatively successful here who want to invest in those kinds of businesses, Black businesses or businesses of color that are the top businesses. And we could easily identify those and really kind of move the needle forward to making sure that those businesses are capitalized and are successful, even in terms of mentorship, in real-time mentorship. One of the things that we had talked about, Michael, and that is really interesting is that being able to pick up the phone as a Black business owner and say, okay, I have this problem, and that someone is there to be able to solve it, or help you talk through it, which to me then makes a big difference as it relates to how we collaborate as a community, because other business owners can then tell you, well, this is what I did via my experience, when I went through it. And here are some ways to do that. And if there's a way where we can point them to different investments, I think it's really interesting. I also think it's really interesting that the solo 401ks and the self-directed IRAs, or do I have it switched, or either way, to me, that's a very interesting strategy. And the reason why I love that is because in our research, we were understanding that there was going to be $7 trillion of basically assets and monies being transferred to millennials. And even more than that, if you included millennials and Xers. So then taking that and giving them ways to be able to reinvest their monies. And then we say, well, hey, not only can you reinvest in local communities, but can you take a share of that and also invest in, businesses of color, as a way of moving that forward, I think builds a very strong ecosystem of
Yep.
capital in ways that, that maybe Black folks and even millennials and even women who are not traditionally banked, we saw that in the CNBC, can find more innovative ways to get capital into their business, and also get mentorship for their business. And I just want to shout out, because I don't want, like, in this video for me not to talk about what the city has done at Pittsfield in terms of bringing in things, people like Eferal or like the Schumacher Center, entry into entrepreneurship, and then what's happening in North County with Lever, but how do we even make those even more accessible in real time? And I think that that's, a way to move. One of the things I wanted to kind of like throw back at you, Michael, and what really came out to me is you were stating and really communicating, emphasizing that we need to have a new way of thinking of what local economic development really means. And I think this is a great opportunity to really talk about that, because, you really brought up, like, I think it was like 10 or 12 points that I thought was really cool in terms of how we usually think of economic development, but what real local economic development looks like, and why investing in local businesses has a much more impactful multiplier effect, into what we're doing. So I would love for you to get into that, man, because that's like really, really, I think the way we should be thinking about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, go on, Gillette.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to give us a bit of a time check, and I don't want to stop your answer to that. So why don't I suggest that once you've if you can answer that, then we can open up to Q&A. And, if we don't have so many questions or whatever, then we can, certainly continue the conversation. But I want to just be mindful of time and respectful of everyone's time tonight. But I think this is, just fantastic conversation, and I certainly could go on for hours participating and listening in on these aspects. So, Michael, I'll turn it over to you to address John's question, and then when you're done, I'll go ahead and kind of open it to the audience.
Well, there's so much to be said about it, but I'll just to give a very short answer. I think that every economic development agency in the country has the problem that they're making an elephant mouse soup, as the old adage goes, and that is, they're saying, well, big businesses are important and little businesses are important, and we add one big business and one little business and it tastes a lot like elephant, right? And so we have economic development now which is almost entirely oriented to the servicing of large global companies and making local businesses less competitive. And they do very superficial things to support local businesses. And in my view, that needs to be turned around, that we should basically say to global businesses, great, you're doing fine, you don't need additional help from us, but we invite you to join us in helping all the smaller businesses and entrepreneurs in our community and creating a more diversified, more self-reliant ecosystem, and making global businesses, to the extent that they exist, not enemies but partners in that, but saying, we're not giving you subsidies, we're giving you a welcome mat into our community, and that's good enough.
Great.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Juliet. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say that, it's as our own, U.S. government, support to small businesses showed, there's a real problem towards that bias and that skewing, exactly to Michael's point. So I'm not even going to try to do any kind of summary at this moment on the call, but I do want to, I know there are a couple people, excuse me, on the call that are doing some work around. Mika, I think it's Local First West Michigan, is doing some, may be able to share some information about diversifying supply chain. Love to hear from her. I know Alice is working in her job in terms of supporting employee-owned businesses. Two things that we've discussed tonight, and I just love to ask each one of them to take a moment, and then I would love to hear if anyone has any questions, again, to John, to Michael, or to this illustrious audience, if I might say so. This isn't just about John and Michael. It's really about all of us participating and coming up with crowdfunding of the ideas, not just the money. So, Mika, if I might ask you to, say a minute or two about your experience in Michigan around this diversification of the local supply chain, or localizing the supply chain. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, I can speak to a little bit about what the city of Grand Rapids has done. So Local First is separate from the city, but we have worked with them to sort of develop this program and be a feeder for this program, where they intentionally source from locally owned business, what they call their micro local business enterprise program. So the business can apply, but they have to go through and talk about their ownership structure. The difference is, Michael, to your point about what we define as local, right? It's not just located here, it's ownership, it's decision making, and all that. So you sign up to be a vendor with the city, which means they will send you contracts, and it's everything from dog food for the city police force dogs to all the different things that you would consider a city to need, with infrastructure and whatnot. Dog food just stands out in my mind because that was the thing that I never would have thought of, right? So essentially you sign up to be a vendor with the city, and then you get a bid discount. So we all have budgets. There is sort of this overlying fear that local businesses are more expensive, which we all know is because that's just the cost of doing business, right? It's correctly. They're hopefully supporting their community in different ways. So what the city has done is implement a bid discount. So if they get a larger company that comes in at a lower price, they will match it with that local company price and then opt for that local business. So that kind of gives them an edge, financially speaking. So a program that they're doing this year, that Local First and a number of other economic support organizations are being a part of, is the Shop Local campaign. So obviously we just passed Small Business Saturday, which I have specific complicated feelings about, mostly because it's not just one day, right? But the city wanted to match larger corporations. So instead of having holiday parties and large gatherings for their employee appreciation, they wanted to match these larger corporations with small local business producers to do like 1,000 of something for their employees. So like gift baskets or pens or flowers or something like that. And so they created a platform where a business would sign up to be on this, and they would say, we have an online store, we have curbside delivery, like all the different social distance things, so people could search that way. And then corporations would sign up to be part of this mailing list or this listserv. And, pros and cons with that, because a small business to make 1,000 of something in a single day is pretty unsustainable. So especially with such a short turnaround time. And then if they scale up to make 1,000 of something, and that's just once a year, what are they going to do? They probably had to take out a lot of debt capital to make that happen. And so where are the buyers the rest of the year? Which again is my complicated relationship with Small Business Saturday.
Thank you, Mika. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You don't think about dog food, for the police dogs. So it's an interesting, and also let's say for the shelter, if it's a city shelter. So, it's a good way to think about sort of the practical applications of what could be sourced locally. And, to your point about, we say, to shop locally can be more expensive. What I think is interesting is, and I learned this and I've, for whatever reason, my brain has not retained the percentage, but that's that short-term procurement thinking that, oh, it's cheaper now, so let's buy it from someplace outside. But when it comes down to the amount that goes back into the community from that,
Right.
it is cheaper because more of your dollar stays locally when you buy local versus outside. So,
Right.
yes, maybe there's a
$68 versus $43.
Okay, exactly. So, to that point, it's like, okay, so that's a short-sighted one-time procurement, discount, which is not really great for the long term. So I just always find that interesting. So thank you. And
Yeah,
Alice,
thank you.
I know that you're working currently with employee-owned businesses. I wonder if you might share a little bit of information. And because you're a native daughter, you have a really strong understanding of Berkshires and how that might apply in the Berkshires, and how we as, many of us members of the Berkshires community, but some not, could apply that or think about how to support that.
Thanks, Gillette. Hey, everybody. Yeah, I think Michael mentioned diversifying ownership, and I think that's a key part of, that's what small businesses are about. They already are examples of diversifying ownership and spreading wealth. But worker ownership is another way to do that. And I'm working with the Working World right now in New York City, and we support companies that are either launching startup worker cooperatives, or we help convert existing companies to worker ownership. So I think that's really a leading edge right now as we look at baby boomers retiring, and a lot of wealth transfer potential at this moment, but there could also be a lot of wealth that evaporates when baby boomers retire. And if they can't find anybody to sell their business to, they might just close it, and it might go away forever, and the jobs will go away, and the wealth that can be created through that business could go away. So it's really a moment right now where we have to think about different options for business owners, because business owners are used to selling to another entrepreneur, but when there's tons of businesses flooding the market, and if you go on to bizbuysell.com, you can see there's a market for selling your business. And if there's tons that are flooding the market, there's not enough buyers for those businesses. And we don't want equity firms to buy them all up and roll them into conglomerates. We don't want that to happen. We want to continue to diversify ownership. So there are ways to help those businesses transition into worker ownership. And our fund at the Working World actually provides the capital for the workers to buy the company from the original owner. And then we provide the technical support to help the workers know how to take over that company. So we actually have a network across the country called Seed Commons, and we have partners. I think that it is something that could be really great in the Berkshires, as a lot of really important businesses are the owners are approaching retirement age. And if we could find the capital and the know-how to help that transition happen, I think it would be really good for our local economy.
Yeah, excellent point, Alice. I literally just this past week talked to two friends one who's in the process of a catering business that he was ready to retire, and then COVID hit. Of course, obviously that decimated it. And he's actually talking about figuring out how to make it an employee-owned company with him staying on it to some degree to help, move that through. And and then another friend who just recently bought a business 2 years ago, who ultimately is saying about his long-term exit strategy and how, some really great employees that he's taken on of over time sharing the share of it. And so I think you're absolutely right. Now is the time to really think about that of what does it mean to turn your business over or to retire and maintain that value. So I know we're getting close to time, and I knew this was going to be a challenge, but I do want to have an opportunity for anyone who has some burning question or comment. And I'd love to say that this won't be the end of this conversation. We'll You know, we'll try and capture some of what like the Seed Commons and some of these great organizations and you know, resources. We'll try and get that included in the blog or on our website once we you know, do a summary of this. But is there anyone that has a question for Michael or for John, or a comment about, you know, a great idea for what we call it, sort of it wasn't micro, that wasn't the right thing, the micro reparations, or, you know, now reparations, you know, things that we can be actively engaging in now.
Oh, hi, did I unmute?
Yes.
Hello, this is Donna. I'm over in Central Mass. Thank you so much for this conversation. I'm not sure if I've got an answer to your direct question, but this whole concept of like the wealth transfer, and I've been thinking about it this year a lot. It'd be nice to make a more mainstream or normalized version of like lateral asset transfers, or that my definition of a future thriving community I'd like to live in is one where everybody thrives, right? And so I'd love to hear your ideas about how do we incentivize this kind of behavior, or normalize it, or encourage more creative. Like right now, as you said, we've got this definition of sort of a problem, that I've got this asset I'd like to find somebody to take over. And then we have a real strong social construct that it's supposed to go to your children or heirs or someone in the family. And that it'd be nice to sort of break that apart a little bit and say, well, let's move this laterally for the purpose of reparations, or because other people in my area will be able to take this over better than someone else. You know, how do we get a bigger conversation started about those ideas?
Excellent. And Michael, I might turn that over to you, because it makes me think about a notion that you said about the retirement. And I must admit, I'm someone who, you know, looks at diversifying my own portfolio. And when we had a conversation, like, you know, if you just take 5% of your portfolio and put it in, let's say, community investment funds, it's really just a small amount for one person, you know, out of my own portfolio. But in aggregate, it's really strong, a strong move, right? It's a good investment. And to Donna's point, how do we normalize, let's say, more of a wealth transfer, like a lateral transfer, and, you know, from a policy or taxation, or how that might be viewed at a kind of a federal level for someone that owns a business? I'd be curious to get your input.
Great. I mean, it's a great question, and it's only because I am mostly a nerd that I go to policy in answering this. But I mean, clearly, culture, belief, politics, that's the big issue here, right? So, but in the universe of local investment, I've been very impressed with some of our friends in Canada, and in New Brunswick, they offer residents a 50% tax credit for local investment. So every dollar they put into a local company, they get 50 cents off of their provincial taxes. Now that's a heck of an incentive. And in Michigan, 2 legislators, one in each house, by the way, both very right-wing Republicans, introduced the same thing in Michigan to support local businesses. Now, I think if we started to enact these kinds of tax credits, let's do a 20% bonus on top of it if it's, you know, fits into a reparations kind of category. And, you know, for African American businesses, Native American businesses, you know, we can play with this definition a little bit. But yeah, I think that there are ways that we can incentivize people to really target their investments this way. I think that I agree that we can also incentivize people to do more donations. But I really think creating the productive for-profit economy around these ideas is going to make the hugest difference long term.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Donna. John, I don't know if you have something that you might want to add to that or not. No, not needed unless you feel so inclined. But it could be an interesting thing for the Black Economic Council to think about in terms of a campaign. I'm just, just thinking off the top of my head of, yeah, how do you normalize the thought that, oh, if you don't have a suitable candidate for your business and you're looking to sell or to transfer, how to make that. Oh, sorry. So John's sound has gone out, so I think he's unable to answer. Are there any other questions that anyone has? Thank you, Donna.
I see that Mika has asked, what policy is this in Michigan? It's a proposed piece of legislation. If you emailed me, I have the number of the bill listed somewhere.
Great. Well, I think, as we're coming to time, and again, I do want to be mindful of everyone's time tonight. I know Michael, I think John is going to have to try and reboot. So if I could ask Michael, if you, maybe before we close out this portion, and we'll spend just a few minutes, I think Rachel was saying, on the Berkshires business, because that's going to be, I think, fairly straightforward. But love to sort of, what is a kind of final closing comment? What would you like to leave this group with, and what are your thoughts and sort of hopes? Your optimistic future hopes.
Yeah, well, I think that I'm really sad that John's computer was not reliable, but he gave us a lot of very useful ideas on how to think about social and racial justice in local economy building. And I think, I know that the local economy movement, it's really interesting because its roots are very multiracial and very multi-ethnic, and people don't necessarily appreciate that. I was in just a shocking conversation with someone who ran affordable housing in Washington, D.C., and that person was arguing to me that, community land trusts were a policy designed to keep wealth in the white community. And I said, don't you know anything about where community land trusts came from? The civil rights movement, basic roots there. So there's a whole education here we need to do about the intersection of local economy and racial and social justice. So all of us, myself included, should be challenged to think about what are 2 or 3 things we can do in the coming year to make this vision real. And I see Great. John is back, so thank you.
Yes. So John, I was asking both you and Michael to sort of leave us out on a kind of a hopeful note, or maybe even a prescriptive note. How would you want to conclude and leave this crowd tonight?
I think this is the greatest opportunity we ever had, even though it looks bleak, via COVID-19. But I think the acceleration of innovation and what I've seen in terms of this community collaborating in ways that they were not doing beforehand has really laid the groundwork for us to really do some amazing things moving forward. So the question that I am asking myself, and that I'm challenging everyone to ask themselves, what is our vision for a successful, thriving, local, and inclusive economy? Because then when we answer that individually for ourselves and we agree upon that, then wow, that means that then we agree on a way forward and that we have the best opportunity to rethink everything and include some of all these innovations and ideas. And like I said, the talent, I feel like the answers are already here. The question is the will and making sure that we incorporate them and that we collaborate effectively to bring those solutions to bear. But I think that's the question to ask. And I see that as one of the most positive things we can do moving forward, is really answering ourselves that question: what does that vision really look like of a local, inclusive, thriving economy within the Berkshires? And I think answering that question is the North Star for us and is our way to success.
That's amazing. Yes, thank you, John. And Michael, both, of sort of what, it sounds like our to-do is for us to be in dialogue about what is that vision, get very clear about where we're going for, and then what are, to Michael's challenge of what are the 2 or 3 things that we can do over the coming months, year, and further and beyond to actively and tangibly change the status quo, which, as we've all talked it out tonight, the silver lining of COVID is it seems that there are no sacred cows. So we have an opportunity to kind of, move forward in a very quote unquote non-traditional way, because quote unquote traditional ways are no longer standing. So it's a real unique opportunity. So I just want to thank, Michael and John in particular. I'd like to thank everybody else who's joined us, Mika and Alice, for being put on the spot. So thank you for sharing your experiences, and we'll hope to continue this dialogue kind of online. We'll send out, like I said, a bit of a summary with some of these resources, et cetera. Michael and John have offered themselves to be, be in contact. So if you have further questions or would like to learn more from either of them, or to get involved with their respective areas of work, please reach out to them. And then, just a little plug for Michael's book. Really a fascinating book. Put Your Money Where Your Life Is. It's just such a profound, I think, vision already to start that visioning of, gosh, am I investing in the place that I care about? So I think, that could be sort of a watchword. And then just one last thing, I'd like to thank everybody at Berkshires, my fellow board members, Susan and Rachel, for providing the platform for us to be able to engage in this type of dialogue. And just like to ask everyone again, if you support our work, this is something we'd like to continue doing. How do we provide some insight, some education, some awareness, some aha moments to our community and beyond about the things that we can do to tangibly change, rebuild, and sustain our local economies. So I'd just like to say that I'll conclude our official program tonight, and to thank everyone. If you are a non-member, but I would like to invite, for those of you who are non-members, you should feel free to go ahead and drop off. If you are a Berkshires member and you would like to stay and have a further discussion, whether you have some questions, would like to discuss anything, to learn more, please feel free to stay on. Otherwise, if there's nothing like that, then we'll just close it out. But we'll just wait a few minutes as people drop off, and for those who'd like to stay.